Hey, friends! Welcome back to our channel, where we explore faith, inspiration, and Bible-based wisdom. Whether you're a new parent, expecting a baby girl, or just someone seeking biblical encouragement, today's episode is going to inspire you. We're diving deep into the life of remarkable women from the Bible, women of wisdom, courage, and beauty. Abigail, the wise and beautiful peacemaker, a biblical name for your baby girl. If you're considering names for your little one, Abigail is a name full of meaning and character. Let's talk about who Abigail was, where her story is found in the Bible, and why her life is still impacting us today. Backstory: who is Abigail? Abigail's story is primarily found in 1 Samuel 25. She was married to a man named Nabal, whose name literally means fool. And, let's just say, Nabal lived up to that name. He was wealthy but harsh, selfish, and unwise, quite the contrast to his wife. Abigail, on the other hand, was described as intelligent and beautiful, 1 Samuel 25 verse 3. But it's her quick thinking, wisdom, and faith that make her stand out as one of the Bible's most inspiring women. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn. King David, before he was king, was on the run from King Saul. He and his men had been protecting Nabal's sheep and shepherds in the wilderness. So, when David sent a request for some food and provisions from Nabal, it was a fair and respectful ask. But Nabal, true to his name, insulted David and his men, saying, "Who is this David?" 1 Samuel 25 verse 10. This wasn't just a rude response, it was dangerous. Offended, David prepared to take revenge by attacking Nabal and wiping out his household. David wasn't just angry, he was ready to act. Abigail's brave intervention. This is where Abigail's wisdom shines. One of Nabal's servants alerted Abigail to the situation, and instead of panicking, she quickly took action. She gathered a generous amount of food and supplies, 200 loaves of bread, wine, sheep, and more, and set out to meet David. But more importantly, Abigail carried with her something far greater than just provisions. She brought humility and wisdom. When she met David, she bowed down and humbly asked him to reconsider. She took responsibility for her husband's actions, though she had nothing to do with them, and in a stunning speech, she reminded David of God's plan for him to be king. She encouraged him to avoid unnecessary bloodshed and trust in God's timing for justice, 1 Samuel 25 verses 24 to 31. Her words touched David deeply. He saw her wisdom and recognized that she had saved him from making a huge mistake. David thanked her, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me," 1 Samuel 25 verse 32. In a moment of heated anger, Abigail's wisdom and peacemaking prevented bloodshed and kept David's conscience clean. The impact: what can we learn from Abigail? Abigail's story is a powerful reminder that wisdom, courage, and humility can turn even the most dangerous situations around. She wasn't a warrior or a queen, but she used her intelligence, faith, and diplomacy to protect her family and the future king of Israel. After her husband Nabal died, God dealt with him in his own way. Abigail eventually became one of David's wives, solidifying her role in biblical history. Her legacy teaches us a lot about the importance of being a peacemaker in a world full of conflict. Jesus himself said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God," Matthew 5 verse 9. Abigail was a living example of this long before those words were spoken. If you're expecting a baby girl, choosing the name Abigail isn't just about a beautiful sound, it's about giving your daughter a name tied to strength, wisdom, and grace. Imagine telling your daughter one day, "You're named after a woman who helped prevent a war and saved lives through her faith and intelligence." So, to all the parents out there thinking about baby names, Abigail is one you definitely want to consider. Her story shows us that one person, with faith and wisdom, can change the course of history. And who knows? Your little Abigail could grow up to be a peacemaker, a leader, and a light to those around her. Anna, the faithful prophetess, a beautiful name for your baby girl. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of a woman from the Bible whose life of devotion, faith, and patience has inspired countless generations. Her name? Anna. If you're a parent expecting a baby girl, or just someone who loves learning about the Bible, Anna's story is one of hope, perseverance, and faithfulness. Let's dive into her powerful journey, what we can learn from her, and why the name Anna could be perfect for your little one. Backstory: who is Anna? Anna's story is found in the New Testament, specifically in the Gospel of Luke 2 verses 36 to 38. Although she only appears in 3 verses, her life and her impact are profound. Anna was a prophetess, which means she was a woman who received and shared messages from God. She lived during the time when Jesus was born and is remembered for her faithfulness, her dedication to prayer, and her long wait for the coming of the Messiah. Anna was from the tribe of Asher, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and the Bible tells us that she was a widow for most of her life. After being married for only 7 years, her husband passed away, and Anna spent the rest of her days, 84 years to be exact, serving God in the temple. She was deeply committed to prayer and fasting, and she never left the temple, making it her home as she waited for the fulfillment of God's promise. Anna's encounter with the Messiah. Anna's story comes to life at a crucial moment in biblical history, when Mary and Joseph bring baby Jesus to the temple in Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as required by Jewish law. On this day, an elderly man named Simeon, who had been promised by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before seeing the Messiah, also arrives at the temple. When Simeon holds Jesus in his arms, he recognizes that this child is the promised Savior. At this same moment, Anna comes into the scene. As soon as she sees Jesus, she knows that he is the long-awaited Messiah, the Redeemer of Israel. After years of waiting, praying, and fasting, Anna's faith is rewarded. Luke tells us that she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem, Luke 2 verse 38. Can you imagine that moment? After decades of waiting in faith, praying daily for the Messiah, she finally sees him, and her response is pure joy and thanksgiving. Anna didn't keep this good news to herself, she immediately shared it with others, spreading the word that the Savior had come. What can we learn from Anna? Although Anna's story is brief, her impact is huge. Her life teaches us a few key lessons that are just as important today as they were then. Faithful patience. Anna waited for 84 years after becoming a widow. In today's fast-paced world, that kind of patience can seem almost impossible. But Anna's life shows us that faithfulness over time brings great reward. She didn't waver in her devotion or give up hope, even after many years. This teaches us that waiting on God's timing is always worth it. A life of prayer and devotion. Anna lived a life fully dedicated to God. She spent her days praying, fasting, and worshipping in the temple. For parents thinking about naming their daughter Anna, it's inspiring to think that your child could grow up with a heart of devotion, just like the prophetess. Recognizing God's promise. When the moment finally came, Anna recognized Jesus as the Messiah. This teaches us the importance of being spiritually aware and in tune with God's voice. Anna didn't miss her moment of destiny because she was focused on God and His promises. Sharing the good news. As soon as Anna encountered Jesus, she couldn't keep the good news to herself. She shared the hope of the Messiah with everyone around her. What a beautiful reminder that when we experience God's goodness, it's meant to be shared with others. The name Anna reflects this spirit of evangelism and joy in sharing God's love. Why the name Anna? The name Anna is simple, timeless, and beautiful, but it also carries deep spiritual significance. In Hebrew, Anna, or Hannah, means grace or favor. Naming your daughter Anna could be a reminder of God's grace over her life, and of the power of prayer and patience. Imagine telling your little girl one day, "You're named after a woman who waited faithfully for God's promise, and when she saw it, she shared it with the world." It's a name that carries a rich legacy of faith, hope, and devotion. So, if you're considering a name for your baby girl, Anna is a name rooted in the powerful story of a woman who never gave up hope and whose life was filled with prayer and grace. Her story reminds us all that no matter how long the wait, God's promises never fail. Deborah, the bold judge and prophetess, a powerful name for your baby girl. Today, we're talking about one of the most courageous, wise, and bold women in the Bible, Deborah. This remarkable woman was a prophetess, a judge, and a military leader all rolled into one. If you're thinking of naming your baby girl Deborah, stick around. We'll dive into her story, where she's mentioned in the Bible, and the legacy of strength, leadership, and faith that comes with this incredible name. Backstory: who is Deborah? Deborah's story is found in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5. She lived during a time when Israel was under oppression by a Canaanite king named Jabin, whose army was led by a powerful commander named Sisera. The Israelites, because of their disobedience, had been living under the harsh rule of the Canaanites for 20 years. Deborah, a prophetess, was already a highly respected leader in Israel. She wasn't just a spiritual leader but also the only female judge mentioned in the Bible. People came to her for wise counsel and justice, and she held court under a palm tree, known as the Palm of Deborah, Judges 4 verse 5. Now, in a time of national crisis, God raised Deborah not just as a judge but also as a deliverer for his people. Deborah's bold leadership? God spoke to Deborah, instructing her to rally the Israelites for battle against Sisera's mighty army. She called for a man named Barak, a warrior, to lead the army of Israel into battle. But here's the thing: Barak was afraid. Sisera's army was much stronger and equipped with 900 iron chariots, the most advanced military technology of the time. So, Barak told Deborah that he wouldn't go unless she went with him, Judges 4 verse 8. Without hesitation, Deborah agreed to go, but she gave Barak a prophetic word: because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman, Judges 4 verse 9. And that's exactly what happened. Barak and Deborah led the Israelites into battle, and with God's help, they completely routed Sisera's army. As the prophecy foretold, it was a woman, not Barak, who would get the glory for taking down the enemy commander. This woman was Jael, who killed Sisera by driving a tent peg through his head while he was hiding in her tent, Judges 4 verse 21. But it was Deborah's leadership, courage, and faith that set the entire victory into motion. What can we learn from Deborah? Deborah's story offers several powerful lessons that are especially relevant for today. She's a shining example of a woman who didn't just sit back when her people needed help, she rose to the occasion with faith and strength. Here's what we can take away from her life. Number 1. Leadership knows no boundaries. Deborah shows us that leadership is not about gender, status, or titles. She was both a spiritual and military leader in a time when women in such roles were rare. If you name your daughter Deborah, you're giving her a name that reflects leadership, wisdom, and a willingness to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. Number 2. Boldness in faith. Deborah trusted God even when the odds were against her people. She didn't back down in the face of an enemy with superior forces. Her faith in God's promises was unwavering. When we name a child after someone like Deborah, we're speaking boldness and courage over their lives, qualities that we all need to live out our faith in a world that can sometimes feel overwhelming. Number 3. Wisdom and counsel. Deborah was sought after for her wisdom. People came to her for guidance, and she delivered justice with fairness and insight. This shows us that wisdom isn't just about knowing things, it's about applying God's truth to the circumstances around us. For parents considering the name Deborah, it's a reminder to speak wisdom and discernment into your daughter's life, encouraging her to be someone others can turn to for sound advice. Number 4. Collaborative leadership. Deborah didn't fight the battle alone. She collaborated with Barak and empowered others to step up. This is an important lesson in teamwork and humility. She didn't seek the spotlight but followed God's instructions and trusted Him to bring victory. Naming your daughter Deborah could inspire her to lead not just with strength, but also with humility and a collaborative spirit. Why the name Deborah? Deborah is a name that means bee in Hebrew, symbolizing industriousness, community, and leadership. Bees, though small, play a vital role in sustaining life, just like Deborah played a crucial role in sustaining her nation. Naming your little girl Deborah is not just about giving her a beautiful name, it's about imbuing her with the legacy of a woman who trusted God, led with courage, and changed the course of history. Imagine your daughter growing up knowing that her name comes from one of the most influential women in the Bible, a leader who stepped forward in faith, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It's a name that will remind her to be brave, wise, and bold in her faith. Esther, the courageous queen who saved a nation. A beautiful name for your baby girl. Today we've got an incredible story of courage, destiny, and divine purpose, one that will inspire parents, especially those expecting a baby girl. The story we're diving into today belongs to none other than Esther, the brave queen whose actions saved an entire nation. If you're looking for a meaningful, powerful name for your little girl, or just want to learn more about one of the most impactful women in the Bible, stay tuned. Esther's story is one of faith, courage, and purpose, and her legacy lives on to this day. Who is Esther? The story of Esther is found in the Old Testament in the book of Esther. Esther was a Jewish girl, originally named Hadassah, who lived in Persia during a time when her people were living in exile. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai after her parents passed away. Esther's story takes place during the reign of King Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, a powerful Persian ruler. When the king's first wife, Queen Vashti, fell out of favor with him, Xerxes decided to search for a new queen. Young women from across the empire were brought to the palace, and through a series of events, Esther, the orphaned Jewish girl, was chosen to be queen. However, she kept her Jewish heritage a secret, as advised by Mordecai. Esther's moment of destiny. Esther's life as queen seemed like a fairy tale at first, but a dark plot soon arose that would test her courage. A man named Haman, who was an official in the king's court, hated Mordecai because he refused to bow down to him. In his rage, Haman convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree that would wipe out all the Jews in the Persian Empire. This was a terrifying moment for the Jewish people. But Mordecai, seeing the imminent danger, reached out to Queen Esther and urged her to plead with the king to save their people. However, there was a big problem. No one, not even the queen, was allowed to approach the king unsummoned. Doing so could result in death, unless the king extended his golden scepter. Faced with this life-or-death decision, Esther was initially hesitant. She knew the risk, and yet Mordecai's words echoed powerfully, "Who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4 verse 14. Mordecai was reminding Esther that her position as queen might not have been by chance, it was part of God's plan to save their people. In a bold move of faith, Esther asked Mordecai and the Jewish community to fast and pray for 3 days. Then, with a heart full of courage, she approached the king. And here's the incredible part: King Xerxes extended his scepter, sparing her life, and asked her what she desired. Esther invited him and Haman to a banquet, and during the second banquet, she revealed Haman's wicked plot and her own Jewish identity. King Xerxes was furious with Haman and ordered him to be executed. The Jewish people were saved, and Esther's courage not only spared her own life, but rescued her entire nation from destruction. The day of their deliverance became known as the Feast of Purim, a celebration still observed by Jews to this day. What can we learn from Esther? Esther's story has stood the test of time because it speaks to some of the most powerful virtues we can embody. Here are some of the key lessons and takeaways from her life. 1. Courage in the face of fear. Esther didn't start off as a fearless hero. She had doubts and fears, just like any of us would. But when the moment of decision came, she chose to act. Her story shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing even when you're scared. Naming your daughter Esther can remind her that bravery comes from stepping up when it matters most, even in uncertain times. 2. Purpose in every position. Esther was placed in a royal position not by accident, but by divine purpose. This teaches us that where we are in life, whether in positions of influence or not, we have a unique purpose designed by God. For parents considering the name Esther, it's a beautiful reminder that your child has a God-given purpose, and she may be destined to do great things. 3. Faith in action. Before taking any action, Esther called for prayer and fasting. She didn't act impulsively, instead, she sought God's guidance before moving forward. This is a powerful lesson about the importance of seeking God in times of decision. Naming your daughter Esther speaks to a legacy of faith that relies on God's wisdom, not just human strength. 4. Using influence for good. Esther had the power and position to change the fate of her people, and she used it wisely. Her story challenges all of us to use whatever influence we have for the greater good. It's a name that reminds us of responsibility, influence, and serving others with humility. Why the name Esther? The name Esther has a few meanings. In Persian, it means star, symbolizing light in the darkness. In Hebrew, it is linked to the word hidden, reflecting how Esther's Jewish identity was hidden until the right time. Both meanings capture the essence of Esther's life. She was a shining light for her people, and her hidden potential was revealed at just the right moment. For parents expecting a baby girl, the name Esther is more than just a beautiful name. It's a name that carries with it a legacy of courage, purpose, and faith. Imagine telling your daughter one day, "You're named after a queen who risked everything to save her people, and God used her bravery to change the course of history." Ruth, the loyal and faithful friend. If you're considering a name for your daughter, Ruth's story might just speak to you. Not only is it a timeless and classic name, but it also carries with it a legacy of strength, kindness, and unwavering devotion. So, let's dive into the story of Ruth and discover why this name could be the perfect choice for your baby girl. Backstory: who is Ruth? Ruth's story is found in the book of Ruth, a short yet incredibly impactful book in the Old Testament. Ruth was a Moabite woman, meaning she wasn't originally part of the Israelite people. The story begins with a man named Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons leaving Israel due to a famine. They settled in Moab, where Elimelech died. After his death, Naomi's 2 sons married Moabite women, one of whom was Ruth. Tragically, both of Naomi's sons died as well, leaving Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law as widows. Naomi, heartbroken and bitter, decided to return to her homeland of Bethlehem after hearing that the famine had ended. She urged Ruth and her other daughter-in-law, Orpah, to stay in Moab and return to their families. Orpah tearfully agreed, but Ruth refused to leave Naomi's side. It's here that we see Ruth's incredible loyalty, as she speaks the famous words, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God my God." Ruth 1 verse 16. This vow of commitment wasn't just to Naomi, but to God as well. Ruth's loyalty and love for Naomi led her to leave behind everything she knew, her home, her culture, and her gods, to follow Naomi and serve the God of Israel. Ruth's new life in Bethlehem. When Ruth and Naomi arrived in Bethlehem, they had very little. They were poor and vulnerable, but Ruth wasn't afraid to work hard to provide for Naomi. She went to glean in the fields. This was a practice in Israel where the poor could follow harvesters and pick up leftover grain. Ruth's dedication and willingness to work did not go unnoticed. The field where Ruth gleaned belonged to a man named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's deceased husband, Elimelech. Boaz was kind and generous to Ruth, offering her protection and allowing her to gather as much grain as she needed. He had heard about Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and admired her for it. As the story unfolds, we see that Boaz had a special role in Ruth's life as what's called a kinsman redeemer. In ancient Israel, a kinsman redeemer was a relative who could marry a widow to protect her family's land and legacy. Naomi, seeing Boaz's kindness toward Ruth, encouraged her to approach him, and in a beautiful turn of events, Boaz agreed to marry Ruth, redeeming her and securing a future for both Ruth and Naomi. But here's where Ruth's story gets even more remarkable. Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed, who would become the grandfather of King David, one of Israel's greatest kings. Even more amazing is that Ruth's lineage leads directly to Jesus Christ. Ruth, a foreigner and once a widow, became part of the very family line of the Savior of the world. What can we learn from Ruth? Ruth's story is about more than just loyalty, it's about faithfulness, love, and God's redemption. Here are a few of the key lessons we can draw from her life. 1. Loyalty and devotion. Ruth's unwavering loyalty to Naomi is one of the most beautiful examples of friendship and family devotion in the Bible. She stuck by Naomi's side, even when it meant leaving behind her own life and facing an uncertain future. Naming your daughter Ruth is a way to speak loyalty and devotion over her life, qualities that are so needed in a world that can often feel transient and unstable. 2. Faith and trust in God's plan. Although Ruth was a Moabite, she chose to follow the God of Israel and trust his plan for her life. She had no idea what awaited her in Bethlehem, but her faith led her to a future far greater than she could have imagined. For parents thinking of the name Ruth, it's a reminder that even when we don't see the whole picture, we can trust that God has a plan for us. 3. Hard work and integrity. Ruth's willingness to work hard, gleaning in the fields to provide for Naomi, shows her strength and integrity. She didn't wait for someone to come and solve her problems, she took action and did what was necessary. The name Ruth carries with it a legacy of diligence and humility. 4. Redemption and purpose. One of the most powerful aspects of Ruth's story is how God used her life for his greater purpose. She went from being a foreign widow to becoming part of the lineage of King David and ultimately Jesus Christ. Ruth's life is a testimony to God's redemption, that no matter where we come from or what we've been through, he can use us in extraordinary ways. Why the name Ruth? The name Ruth means friend or companion in Hebrew, which is fitting given her incredible friendship with Naomi. It's a short, sweet, and timeless name that carries a rich biblical legacy. By naming your daughter Ruth, you're giving her a name that speaks of faithfulness, love, and the power of God's redemption. Imagine telling your little girl one day that she's named after a woman who showed extraordinary loyalty and faith, and whose life became part of the greatest story ever told, the story of Jesus. Hannah, a faithful woman of prayer. Today's story is about a woman of extraordinary faith, persistence, and deep devotion, Hannah. If you're a parent expecting a baby girl, you're in for something special. The name Hannah holds so much meaning, and by the end of this video, you'll see why her story is perfect for anyone searching for a name that embodies faith, strength, and grace. So, let's dive into the story of Hannah, her backstory, her powerful prayer life, and her lasting legacy in Scripture. Who is Hannah? Hannah's story is found in the book of 1 Samuel, chapters 1 and 2. She was married to a man named Elkanah, who loved her deeply, but Hannah faced a deep, painful struggle. She was unable to have children. In a society where motherhood was highly valued, this caused Hannah great sorrow and heartache. On top of that, Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, was able to have children, and she often mocked and ridiculed Hannah for her infertility. Despite the pain, Hannah never turned away from God. Year after year, she faithfully went with her family to the temple at Shiloh to worship and offer sacrifices. But one year, Hannah's sorrow became overwhelming, and she decided to pour out her heart to God in prayer. Hannah's prayer and promise. One of the most powerful aspects of Hannah's story is her relationship with God through prayer. In deep anguish, she went to the temple and wept bitterly, praying for a child. In her desperation, Hannah made a vow to God, saying, "O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life." 1 Samuel 1 verse 11. Her prayer wasn't just about her desire for motherhood, it was about dedicating her future child completely to God's service. This shows us that even in her pain, Hannah's heart was aligned with God's purposes. While she prayed, the high priest Eli noticed her and, seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, assumed she was drunk. But when she explained her deep sorrow and desperate prayer, Eli blessed her, saying that God would grant her request. In faith, Hannah left the temple, no longer filled with sadness, trusting that God had heard her prayer. And sure enough, in due time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, which means heard by God, because the Lord had answered her prayer. Hannah's fulfillment of her promise. True to her word, Hannah didn't forget the vow she had made to God. When Samuel was still a young child, she brought him to the temple in Shiloh to be raised under the guidance of Eli, dedicating him fully to the Lord's service. This must have been incredibly difficult for Hannah. Imagine praying for years for a child, receiving that blessing, and then giving him up to serve God. Yet, her faith and obedience were unwavering. In her words to Eli, she said, "I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." 1 Samuel 1 verses 27 to 28. Hannah's act of dedication wasn't a moment of loss, but a moment of profound faith. She knew that Samuel's life belonged to God, and she trusted him with her most precious gift. Samuel went on to become one of Israel's greatest prophets, anointing both King Saul and King David, and guiding the nation through critical periods in its history. The impact. What can we learn from Hannah? Hannah's story is rich with lessons that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Let's take a look at some of the key takeaways from her life. 1. Faithful prayer. Hannah's first response to her pain was to pray. She didn't give up when her prayers weren't immediately answered. Instead, she pressed into her faith, laying her heart before God with honesty and trust. Naming your daughter Hannah speaks to the power of persistent, faithful prayer, reminding her to seek God in all circumstances, especially in moments of struggle. 2. God hears us. The name Samuel means heard by God, and Hannah's story is a powerful reminder that God listens to our prayers. Even when it feels like He is silent, God is working behind the scenes. If you choose the name Hannah for your daughter, it's a reminder that God hears her every cry, and He is always present, even in difficult times. 3. Surrendering to God's will. Hannah's promise to dedicate her son to God is a testament to her heart of surrender. She wasn't just praying for personal gain, she wanted God's will to be done. This shows us the importance of aligning our desires with God's plans. Naming your daughter Hannah can inspire her to live a life fully surrendered to God, trusting Him with her future. 4. Grace and obedience. Hannah was able to give Samuel to God because she understood that her blessings ultimately came from Him. Her obedience didn't come from obligation, but from a place of love and trust. Hannah's name, which means grace or favor, reflects the grace she received from God and the grace she showed in fulfilling her vow. Why the name Hannah? The name Hannah means grace or favor in Hebrew, and it's a name that carries a deep sense of faith, trust, and prayer. When you name your daughter Hannah, you're giving her a legacy of faithfulness and devotion. It's a name that speaks of God's grace, His ability to hear our prayers, and His faithfulness in answering them in His time. Imagine telling your daughter that she is named after a woman who, through deep pain and prayer, became a mother and then gave her child back to God in obedience and love. That's a legacy of grace and faith that will inspire her throughout her life. Jael, the fearless warrior of faith. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories from the Bible. Today, we're talking about a lesser-known but incredibly brave and bold woman in Scripture, Jael. Jael may not be the first name that comes to mind when you think of Bible heroes, but her story is one of immense courage, quick thinking, and unwavering faith. She played a crucial role in the deliverance of Israel at a pivotal time in its history. For those of you expecting a baby girl, the name Jael carries a powerful legacy. By the end of this video, you'll see why naming your daughter Jael will inspire her to be courageous, determined, and strong in the face of challenges. Let's dive into Jael's backstory, her moment of bravery, and how her actions changed the course of history for an entire nation. Who is Jael? Jael's story is found in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5. She lived during a time when the Israelites were oppressed by the Canaanite king Jabin, whose powerful military commander Sisera terrorized the people of Israel for 20 years. The Israelites were in desperate need of deliverance, and God raised up a woman named Deborah, a prophetess and judge, to lead the nation during this time. Deborah called on a warrior named Barak to lead Israel's army against Sisera, but Barak hesitated and only agreed to go into battle if Deborah accompanied him. Deborah agreed, but foretold that the honor of killing Sisera would not go to Barak, but to a woman. That woman would turn out to be Jael. Jael wasn't an Israelite. She was the wife of Heber the Kenite, a group of people who had friendly relations with both the Israelites and the Canaanites. This placed Jael in a unique position, a bridge between both sides, where her allegiance wasn't immediately clear. Jael's bold action. Now, here's where Jael's courage and quick thinking changed the course of history. After the battle began, God intervened, and the Israelites, under Barak's leadership, defeated Sisera's army. Sisera, however, managed to escape the battlefield and fled on foot, looking for a place to hide. Exhausted and desperate, he came upon Jael's tent. Because of the peaceful relations between Heber's family and the Canaanites, Sisera assumed Jael's tent was a safe place to hide. Jael greeted Sisera warmly and invited him inside. She covered him with a blanket and even gave him milk to drink, which comforted and relaxed him. Sisera, thinking he was safe, asked Jael to stand guard at the door while he slept. But Jael had different plans. Instead of protecting Sisera, she recognized the opportunity before her. Once Sisera fell asleep, Jael took a tent peg and a hammer and, with decisive action, drove the peg through his temple, killing him instantly. Her bold act fulfilled Deborah's prophecy that a woman would be the one to bring down Sisera. When Barak arrived, searching for his enemy, Jael calmly showed him the dead body of Sisera, confirming that the victory was complete. The impact: what can we learn from Jael? Jael's story is both shocking and inspiring. While her actions were violent, they were also incredibly courageous and strategic. She seized the moment to stand for what was right, even though she wasn't directly part of the Israelite community. Here are a few key lessons we can take away from Jael's story. 1. Courage in unlikely places. Jael wasn't a warrior like Deborah or Barak. She was a homemaker, living in a tent, far removed from the battlefield. Yet, when the moment came, she demonstrated extraordinary bravery. Naming your daughter Jael is a reminder that courage isn't just found on the battlefield, it can be found in the quiet, everyday moments when we're called to do something out of the ordinary. Jael's story shows us that even in the most unexpected circumstances, we can rise up and be fearless. 2. Taking bold, decisive action. Jael didn't hesitate when the opportunity presented itself. She knew that Sisera was a dangerous enemy to Israel, and she acted swiftly to eliminate the threat. Her story encourages us to act with decisiveness when it comes to defending what is right, even when it's difficult or risky. By naming your daughter Jael, you're giving her a legacy of boldness and a reminder that when the time comes to stand for justice or truth, hesitation isn't an option. 3. A woman of strategy and wisdom. Jael's actions weren't rash, they were calculated. She knew how to handle the situation with both strength and subtlety. First, she created an atmosphere of safety for Sisera, then she struck when the time was right. This teaches us the importance of wisdom and strategy, especially when faced with difficult situations. A girl named Jael can be inspired to use her intellect and wisdom to navigate life's challenges. 4. God can use anyone. Jael wasn't part of Israel, and yet God used her to bring victory to his people. Her story reminds us that God can use anyone, regardless of their background, status, or position, to fulfill his plans. Naming your daughter Jael speaks of the potential she has to be used by God in mighty ways, no matter where she comes from or what path she takes in life. Why the name Jael? The name Jael means mountain goat, symbolizing resilience, strength, and the ability to thrive in harsh environments. Like a mountain goat that skillfully navigates treacherous terrain, Jael maneuvered through a tense situation with grace and precision. Her story reflects the qualities of bravery, quick thinking, and fierce loyalty. Naming your daughter Jael sets a strong and unique foundation for her life, reminding her that she is capable of great things, even when the odds are against her. It's a name that carries the legacy of a woman who, through sheer determination and faith, delivered a nation from its oppressor. So, if you're looking for a name that symbolizes boldness, bravery, and faith, Jael is a strong and unique choice. It's a name with deep biblical roots, carrying a legacy of courage and decisive action that will inspire your daughter to live fearlessly. Jemima, a symbol of restoration and beauty. If you're a parent expecting a baby girl and searching for a name with deep meaning and a story of hope, Jemima is a perfect choice. Jemima's story is connected to one of the most famous figures in the Bible, Job, and her name speaks of restoration, blessing, and beauty after immense hardship. We'll explore who Jemima was, the significance of her name, and the powerful lessons we can draw from her life. Who is Jemima? Jemima is mentioned in the final chapter of the book of Job, specifically in Job 42 verse 14. She is one of the 3 daughters born to Job after he experienced a life filled with devastating loss and extraordinary restoration. To fully appreciate Jemima's significance, we have to take a step back and look at the story of her father, Job. Job was a righteous and wealthy man who lived in the land of Uz. He was known for his integrity, devotion to God, and his prosperity. However, Job's life took a tragic turn when he faced unimaginable trials. In a short period, Job lost his wealth, his health, and, most heartbreaking of all, his children. though Job's friends accused him of wrongdoing, and even his wife urged him to curse God, Job remained steadfast in his faith, though he struggled deeply with understanding the reasons for his suffering. Job's journey is a powerful reflection of human pain, faith, and the questions we ask in times of hardship. In the end, God restored Job's fortunes, doubling what he had before, and gave him 7 sons and 3 daughters. Among those daughters was Jemima, whose name and life signify beauty, grace, and a fresh start after a season of great suffering. But what makes Jemima's story even more significant is the cultural context in which she lived. In ancient times, daughters were often not listed in genealogies or given inheritance rights, as this was traditionally reserved for sons. However, the Bible specifically mentions that Job gave Jemima and her sisters an inheritance along with their brothers, Job 42 verse 15. This was highly unusual and highlights how Job's family broke the mold of typical societal expectations, emphasizing the value and honor God placed on his daughters. The name Jemima means dove, which symbolizes peace, beauty, and purity. Doves are also often seen as messengers of hope and renewal in Scripture. By giving his daughter this name, Job was speaking over her a future filled with peace and a reminder of God's faithfulness in restoring what had been lost. Jemima's significance. Jemima's introduction comes at a moment of profound restoration in the life of Job. After enduring great suffering, God blessed Job's later years with incredible prosperity and joy. In Job 42 verse 15, we are told something extraordinary about Job's daughters. Nowhere in all the land were there found women as beautiful as Job's daughters. Jemima, along with her sisters Keziah and Keren-Happuch, were celebrated for their beauty, both inside and out. But what makes Jemima's story even more significant is the cultural context in which she lived. In ancient times, daughters were often not listed in genealogies or given inheritance rights, as this was traditionally reserved for sons. However, the Bible specifically mentions that Job gave Jemima and her sisters an inheritance along with their brothers, Job 42 verse 15. This was highly unusual and highlights how Job's family broke the mold of typical societal expectations, emphasizing the value and honor God placed on his daughters. The name Jemima means dove, which symbolizes peace, beauty, and purity. Doves are also often seen as messengers of hope and renewal in Scripture. By giving his daughter this name, Job was speaking over her a future filled with peace and a reminder of God's faithfulness in restoring what had been lost. What can we learn from Jemima? Though Jemima's role in the Bible may seem brief, her name and legacy carry profound meaning. Here are some of the key lessons we can draw from Jemima's story. 1. Beauty from ashes. Jemima was born into a family that had been through incredible suffering, yet her life represented new beginnings and the beauty that God can bring out of the darkest seasons. Her story reminds us that no matter what trials we face, God is always at work, bringing restoration and blessing. Naming your daughter Jemima can symbolize the hope that, even after life's most difficult moments, God can create something beautiful. 2. God's restoration. The birth of Jemima marked a new chapter in Job's life, where God restored what had been lost. In the same way, her name is a powerful reminder of God's ability to restore us, whether it's our joy, our peace, or the dreams we thought were gone. Naming your daughter Jemima speaks to the promise of God's restoration and his care over our lives. 3. Breaking cultural norms. The fact that Jemima and her sisters were given an inheritance shows the unique way in which God elevated their status. In a culture where daughters often went unnamed and unmentioned, Jemima stood out as someone who was honored and valued. Naming your daughter Jemima can be a way of speaking dignity, honor, and equality over her life, encouraging her to walk confidently, knowing that she is deeply cherished. 4. A symbol of peace. As mentioned earlier, the name Jemima means dove, a symbol of peace. In a world filled with turmoil and uncertainty, Jemima's name serves as a reminder of the peace that God offers to those who trust in him. By choosing this name for your daughter, you're blessing her with a legacy of calmness, serenity, and faith, knowing that God's peace will guide her through life's ups and downs. Why the name Jemima? The name Jemima is not only beautiful in sound but also rich in meaning. It carries the symbolism of renewal, peace, and restoration. When you name your daughter Jemima, you're giving her a legacy that ties her to one of the most hopeful stories in the Bible, where, after great loss, God's blessings flowed abundantly. For parents expecting a baby girl, Jemima is a name that will remind your daughter of God's faithfulness in all circumstances. Whether she faces challenges or celebrates victories, her name will be a constant reminder that God brings beauty from ashes and peace in the midst of storms. So, if you're looking for a name that embodies beauty, peace, and hope, Jemima is a wonderful choice. It's a name rooted in one of the most touching stories of restoration in the Bible, offering a legacy of faith, strength, and renewal for your daughter. Keziah, a fragrant blessing of restoration. Referenced in Job 42 verse 14. Keziah, one of the daughters of Job, is a name of beauty, hope, and renewal. Her story is brief yet deeply significant, symbolizing God's grace and the restoration of blessings. Keziah, whose name means cinnamon or fragrance, is mentioned in the final chapter of the book of Job, a book that tells the dramatic story of loss, endurance, and ultimate restoration. In the earlier chapters, Job, a faithful servant of God, loses everything: his wealth, health, and even his children. But despite his immense suffering, Job remains steadfast in his faith, and in the end, God restores Job's fortunes, giving him double what he had before. As part of this restoration, God blesses Job with 3 beautiful daughters: Jemima, Keziah, and Keren-Happuch. Keziah stands out not just because of her exotic and fragrant name, but because of what she represents. She and her sisters are described as the most beautiful women in all the land, Job 42 verse 15, and what's even more remarkable is that their father gave them an inheritance, which was unusual in that time when sons typically received the family wealth. This speaks volumes about Job's renewed sense of justice, equality, and value for all his children. Keziah's story, though brief, is inspiring for parents expecting a daughter. Her name is a reminder that life's darkest moments can give way to a fragrant new beginning. It symbolizes beauty that arises from ashes, and how God's blessings can transform sorrow into joy. Naming your daughter Keziah connects her with a legacy of divine favor, renewal, and the promise that God is able to restore what has been lost. For parents, choosing the name Keziah is not only choosing a name of beauty, but one that speaks of hope, endurance, and the sweet fragrance of God's restoration in times of difficulty. Leah, the unexpected matriarch. Leah was the first wife of Jacob, but not by choice. Her father tricked Jacob into marrying her instead of her younger sister, Rachel. Can you imagine starting a marriage like that? But here's where it gets amazing. Despite being unloved by her husband, Leah became the mother of 6 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Leah's story shows us that God sees beyond our earthly struggles. He blessed her with children, including Judah, from whose line Jesus would eventually come. Talk about a plot twist. For expecting parents, naming your daughter Leah is a beautiful reminder that God's plans are greater than our own. It's a name that signifies strength in adversity and the potential for greatness, even when the world overlooks you. Martha, the hostess with the mostest. Martha, a woman who teaches us about the balance between service and spiritual focus. Martha was a close friend of Jesus and sister to Mary and Lazarus. She's famous for her hospitality. When Jesus came to visit, Martha was all about making sure everything was perfect. But remember that moment when Jesus gently reminded her that sometimes we need to stop and listen. Martha's story isn't just about that one moment, though. She was also a woman of great faith. When her brother Lazarus died, she proclaimed her belief in Jesus as the Messiah even before he raised Lazarus from the dead. Naming your daughter Martha is choosing a name that represents dedication, service, and strong faith. It's a reminder to balance our busy lives with moments of spiritual reflection. So, next time you're caught up in the hustle and bustle, remember Martha and take a moment to put God first. Hit that like button if this spoke to you, and don't forget to subscribe. Mary, the chosen mother. Blessed viewers, today we're exploring the extraordinary story of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Talk about a life-changing yes. Mary was just a young woman when an angel appeared to her with the most mind-blowing news ever: she would give birth to the Son of God. Can you imagine? But Mary's response was simple and profound: I am the Lord's servant. Throughout Jesus' life, Mary was there, from the joy of his birth to the agony of his crucifixion. Her unwavering faith and obedience to God's plan make her one of the most revered figures in Christianity. For parents considering this name, Mary represents the ultimate example of faith, obedience, and motherly love. It's a name that carries a legacy of strength, humility, and grace. Remember, when God calls you to something big, be like Mary, say yes, and put God first. Michal, or A Princess's Tale. Today we're diving into the complex story of Michal, a princess who loved a shepherd turned king. Michal was King Saul's daughter who fell in love with David. She even helped him escape when her father wanted to kill him. Talk about family drama. But their story wasn't all smooth sailing. Later, when David danced before the Lord, Michal criticized him, leading to a rift in their relationship. Michal's story teaches us about the complexities of love, loyalty, and the dangers of pride. It reminds us that even those close to God's chosen can struggle with their faith. For parents considering this name, Michal represents a multifaceted character. It's a name that carries royal heritage and serves as a reminder that faith requires humility and constant nurturing. Life's not always simple, but remember to put God first in all situations. If you found this interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more biblical deep dives. Naomi, from bitter to blessed? Faithful viewers, let's start exploring the inspiring journey of Naomi, a woman who went from tragedy to triumph. Naomi's story starts with heartbreak. After moving to Moab with her husband and sons, she lost them all. Can you imagine the pain? She even told people to call her Amara, meaning the bitter. But God wasn't finished with her story. Enter Ruth, her daughter-in-law, who chose to stay with Naomi. Together, they returned to Bethlehem where God turned their fortunes around. Naomi went from empty to full, eventually becoming the great-grandmother of King David. Naming your daughter Naomi is a powerful choice. It's a name that embodies resilience, the beauty of loyal relationships, and the amazing ways God can restore our lives. Remember, even in your darkest moments, put God first. He can turn your mourning into dancing. If this story touched you, show some love with a like and subscribe for more uplifting content. Phoebe, the unsung hero. Today we're shining a spotlight on Phoebe, a woman who might not be a headliner in the Bible, but whose impact was significant. Phoebe was a deaconess in the early Christian church, specifically mentioned by Paul in his letter to the Romans. He called her a servant of the church and a succorer or helper of many, including himself. This tells us she was a woman of action, dedicated to serving God and others. Although we don't know much about her personal life, the fact that Paul entrusted her to deliver his important letter to the Romans speaks volumes about her character and reliability. For parents considering this name, Phoebe represents service, reliability, and quiet strength. It's a name for a girl who might not always be in the spotlight, but whose impact is deeply felt. Remember, you don't need to be famous to make a difference. Like Phoebe, put God first and serve others. If you're inspired by unsung heroes, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Priscilla, the power couple's better half. Priscilla, one half of an early Christian power couple. Priscilla, along with her husband Aquila, were tent makers who became crucial in spreading the gospel. They worked alongside Paul, hosted church meetings in their home, and even explained the way of God more adequately to Apollos, a powerful preacher. What's remarkable about Priscilla is that she's often mentioned before her husband, which was unusual for that time. This suggests she played a significant, if not leading, role in their ministry. Naming your daughter Priscilla is choosing a name that represents partnership, teaching, and active faith. It's for a girl who might grow up to be a leader, a teacher, and a partner in spreading God's word. Remember, whether you're in the spotlight or behind the scenes, put God first in all you do. If you're inspired by Priscilla's story, hit that like button and subscribe for more biblical boss ladies. Rebecca, the bride of promise. Today we're diving into the story of Rebecca, a woman chosen by God to continue the lineage of Abraham. Rebecca's story starts with an act of kindness, offering water to a stranger and his camels. Little did she know, this stranger was searching for a wife for Isaac, Abraham's son. Her generous spirit led her to become part of God's grand plan. Rebecca was strong-willed and decisive. When it was time to leave her family, she didn't hesitate. Later, she played a crucial role in ensuring Jacob, rather than Esau, received Isaac's blessing, fulfilling God's prophecy, even if her methods were questionable. For parents considering this name, Rebecca represents kindness, decisiveness, and being part of God's bigger picture. It's a name for a girl who might change the course of history through her actions. Remember, small acts of kindness can lead to big destinies when you put God first. If you're inspired by Rebecca's story, show love with a like and subscribe. Ruth, loyalty beyond borders. Ruth, a woman whose loyalty and faith knew no bounds. Ruth was a Moabite woman who married into an Israelite family. When her husband died, instead of returning to her own people, she chose to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, famously saying, "Your people will be my people and your God my God." Her loyalty and hard work in the fields caught the attention of Boaz, a wealthy landowner. Their marriage not only redeemed Ruth and Naomi from poverty but also placed Ruth in the lineage of Jesus. Naming your daughter Ruth is choosing a name that embodies loyalty, faith, and the rewards of choosing God's path. It's a reminder that when we step out in faith, God can use us in amazing ways. Remember, loyalty to God and His people can lead to incredible blessings. Always put God first. If Ruth's story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring biblical women. Salome, witness to history. Salome is a woman who witnessed some of the most pivotal moments in Jesus' ministry. Salome was one of the women who followed Jesus and supported his ministry. She was present at his crucifixion and was among the first to discover his empty tomb on Easter morning. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. Some scholars believe Salome was the mother of disciples James and John, which would make her the one who asked Jesus to give her son special positions in his kingdom. If so, her story teaches us about ambition, misunderstanding, and ultimately, faithful service. For parents considering this name, Salome represents devotion, witnessing incredible events, and being part of history. It's a name for a girl who might be destined to see and participate in great things. Remember, when you put God first, you might just find yourself witness to miracles. If you're inspired by Salome's proximity to Jesus' story, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more biblical insights. Tabitha, Dorcas, the disciple of good deeds. Today we're shining a light on Tabitha, also known as Dorcas, a woman whose kindness literally brought her back to life. Tabitha was known for her good works and acts of charity, especially making clothes for widows. When she fell ill and died, the community was so distraught that they sent for Peter. Incredibly, God used Peter to bring Tabitha back to life. Her resurrection wasn't just a miracle, it was a testament to the impact of her kindness. The news spread, causing many to believe in the Lord. For parents considering this name, Tabitha, or Dorcas, represents compassion in action, the power of good deeds, and God's ability to work miracles through those who serve others. Remember, when you put God first and serve others, your impact can be life-changing, maybe even life-giving. If Tabitha's story inspires you to be the hands and feet of Jesus, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of faith in action.